Today I am here to specially indicate the instances, the circumstances, and the situations when we should use passive voice sentences. Now let me start. Passive voice sentences have the construction like objective, word plus be verb plus V3. This is the simple construction of passive voice sentences. I am insulted. This one was objective in the active voice and it becomes subject one, and insulted is the V3 and here is the be verb. So almost every time this formation, this construction is followed while making passive voice sentences. The dog will be beaten. This was the object and here it has become subject. Will be is the be verb and beaten is V3. This is the construction of common passive voice sentences. And now I have to say in which cases, in which circumstances, in which places we will use passive voice sentences. Now let me describe. It is feasible, it is logical to use passive voice sentences when the case of stealing, the case of losing, the case of breaking is done, where the person who commits stealing, the person who commits breaking, or person who commits losing is not known. So the first case where the doer is unknown. When the doer is unknown, we have to use passive voice sentences. Example A. My pen was stolen. Here it is very clear that somebody stole my pen, but who stole my pen is not known. So in this case, we must use passive voice sentences. Example 2. Our window glass was broken. Here also somebody broke our window glass, but who broke this is not known. So here the doer is unknown. When the doer is unknown, we must use passive voice sentence. And example 3. My friend's pen was lost. My friend's pen was lost. Here the way how it was lost was not known, but it was the fact that his pen was lost. So here in all the cases, the action of stealing, action of breaking, and action of losing, the person who does this or the way it is happened is not known. So where doer is unknown, we must use passive voice sentences. Example D. The dacoit was killed at night, or the dacoit was killed last night. But who killed this dacoit is not known. So in these cases, we must use passive voice sentences where the doer is unknown. In another case where it is not necessary to mention the name of the doer, we must use passive voice. Not necessary to mention the name of the doer. As for example, rice is cultivated in huge quantity. The cultivation of rice is done, but who cultivates it is well known, so it is not necessary. We know farmers cultivate rice, etc. So we should not mention the name of the doer. In this case, where the mention of the name of the doer is not necessary, we must use passive voice sentences. This is the second need. This is the second situation where we should use passive voice sentences. And the third, when we describe a process, when you describe the preparation of something, we usually use passive voice sentences. Describe the processing of something, preparation of something. Example 1. The rice is boiled for 20 minutes. This is one of the steps of making rice, preparation of rice. So while describing the preparation, we usually use passive voice sentences. This is the third case where passive voice sentences are used. Next, in another case where we know who the doer is, we use passive voice sentences. In the case of police interrogation, arrest by police, or expelling of a student by a teacher or by the headmaster, we know that headmaster expels a student, or an invigilator expels a student, or a police arrests a criminal. So here we know who does the action, and it is not necessary to mention their name because everybody knows who does this. So in these cases we must use passive voice sentences. The student who was cheating in the examination hall was expelled. Here we know who expels or who expelled a cheating student. So here we should not mention his name and passive voice is used. The culprit was arrested. Here we should not mention the name of the agent, means the police. That's why we use passive voice sentence. The culprit was arrested. We know that culprit was arrested by the police and police arrested the culprit, but we should not use active voice sentence. Culprit was arrested. And in such cases where we know very well who the doer is, we should use passive voice sentences. We should not use the police arrested the culprit or the invigilator expelled the student who was cheating in the examination hall. We should not use active voice sentence. Better to use passive voice sentence because we know that these actions were taken by who? Taken by whom? So this is another case of using passive voice sentences. And there are also another circumstance or another situation where we should use passive voice sentences, as where we know well who the receiver is, means where the receiver of something is given stress or importance. In a sentence where the receiver is given importance. The bucket was filled with water. Here the bucket receives the water. So the importance is on the bucket. The bucket was filled with water. That's why passive voice is used. Mr. Sen was conferred the diploma. Here the receiver is Mr. Sen. That's why we put a stress on Mr. Sen. The importance of Mr. Sen is here in the sentence. That's why this sentence is written in passive voice form. These are all the cases, instances where we should use passive voice. Better to use passive voice. We may use active voice, but it is better to use passive voice in such circumstances, because in this way we will be able to beautify our